and foremost, if you're looking at my hand, it's because my clamp broke. So the phone is just literally laying down right next to me. So that's why you see in my hand. You don't see anything, it's just because it's dark. But the phone is just laying down next to me. But I had to get this out while it was just at the top of my brain, and I might dig into it a little bit deeper when I do a clip later, I don't know. But I had to get into it because I feel that a lot of children out here are cheated. And there's a lot of parents who are misinformed because they may not be up on it as much as they need to be. And I want to possibly enlighten someone who may not know if they are gifted. Because I believe parents are being cheated when their kids are being talked about in the gifted space. The above average intelligent space where they should probably be taking different courses, taking courses that are going to put them on a collegiate track versus just a general track. Because that still lives out here. It's always been in existence, but it may be downplayed in certain areas. It is definitely downplayed in the Ann Arbor Public School area, but I know that there is a general track and there is a college track. And when they put you on the general track, they're just really pushing you through school. You'll take whatever courses are available to you, but they're not going to elevate you when it's time to take that next level. Because when you attempt to take that next level, you don't have any idea what those college entry courses are because you were never taught college prep classes in high school. But it starts well before that, whether you should know your child is gifted or not, or whether child knows they're gifted or not, or teachers told your child that they're gifted or told you that they're gifted. All this happens way before high school graduation. And it's unfortunate that a lot of kids are left out, specifically black kids, because so much more emphasis is just put on them to get through school a lot of times, and you don't really know exactly where your child is at. And I was one of those children, and I'm not going to sit up here and say that I had this extreme intelligence level, but I was definitely better than the average bear. I was one of those children that was told that he was just a constant problem, and in which I may have been in some ways. But at 10 years old, in the 4th grade, I was told that I would be in prison by the time I was 18 years old for killing somebody. I was told this by my 4th grade teacher, James Corbett. I was told this. Now, I was never a violent child. I was a very aggressive child, but I was never a violent child where I went around doing things that would have brought, at that time, Mr. Corbett. I would call him Jim now if I saw him, but I called him Mr. Corbett back then. And I'm not sure exactly why Mr. Corbett chose to tell me that, but I told my mother. And once I told my mother, she set up a meeting with Mr. Corbett. And once she set that meeting up with Mr. Corbett, she came to the school after work one day. I stayed after school. And we all sat down and talked. And then after about 10 minutes, her and Mr. Corbett had a conversation. That conversation wasn't like the conversation when I was actually in the classroom with them, it was a tad bit different. I heard my mother cuss at him and say things to him that I really had never heard up to that point. I had heard her cuss. I had heard her use profanity, absolutely. But I had never heard her directed towards someone with such anger. She was upset. She was upset that someone would take it upon themselves to tell a 10-year-old that by the time they were 18 years old, they would be in prison for killing someone. This is her baby. I was her baby. I'm not trying to put any juice on that, but I was her baby. She had twin boys who were 9 years older than me, and I was her third child, and I was the baby. She knew I could be mischievous. She knew I wasn't a perfect child. But the last thing she would probably think of me was a potential murderer. And the biggest problem that they found with me was I just didn't have enough to do. And like I said, I didn't have this ridiculous intelligence level, but certain things interested me, certain things didn't. But if we had a task, I'd do the task, I'd get done with it, and then I was bored. So that's where my mischievous ways would come in. And until they found that maybe just giving me more to do, which Jim wasn't creative enough to do, he thought he would demean me and tell me that I was going to be a killer of I don't know who by the time I was 18 years old. So we never really had a good relationship after that. I mean, I went to this man's house and ate, had a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with the crust off. You know, his wife did that. He was a newly married guy. I think they might have been married a couple of years at that time. Maybe even had a small child. Can't quite remember. But he was supposed to be someone that I looked up to. He was supposed to be somebody who understood me. He was a soccer player. I know he was a pretty decent soccer player. I remember that. We played a lot of soccer when we were in his class. And I was a halfway decent athlete, even at 10. But I didn't particularly like soccer. I loved baseball. I loved football, loved basketball, and I played all of those, but I also played soccer. Go along to get along, whatever. But when they started to give me more work and that wasn't fulfilling me, one of the teachers, Mrs. Stoles, she had taught a couple of my cousins, she had taught my brothers, and her older son knew my brothers, so she knew the family. She knew the family pretty well. She would pull me out of my 4th grade class and take me to her 6th grade class. And I started to do the work in her 6th grade class so efficiently to the point where they were like, why are we wasting time with this kid? He can do work of a 6th grader and he's in 4th grade. And at that time, they were pushing for me to be doubly promoted. My mother was just against it. She just couldn't see me going to junior high school at 10. I would be 11 that second semester, as it were. And she couldn't see it. She just couldn't. She said, "You'll be a freak. You'll be so much smaller than those kids, and this, that, and the other." She wasn't paying any attention to the scholastic part of it and what that possibly would have done, because it would have immediately put me into a situation where obviously I was gifted, and they didn't really toss that word around that much back then. I didn't hear gifted. High IQ, this, that, and the other. You would hear words like that, phrases like that, but you didn't really hear gifted. But I was obviously gifted. I obviously, could retain information, regurgitate it, with comprehension. And I was doing that at a 12-year-old level, 6th grade level, and I was only in 4th grade. But I think nowadays, it would be a miracle to have all that stuff happen, and hopefully no kid has to be told he's going to be the killer of someone by the time he's 18 for this to happen. But there are plenty of kids out here who have a ridiculous intelligence level, and they're just not what would be considered a top student because they're probably learning at the pace that the teacher's teaching, not at the pace that they can actually learn. And that was my problem. I was only learning at the pace that Jim Corbett was teaching. I wasn't learning at the pace that I can learn. And there's many, many, many more kids out here who have probably had situations somewhat similar to this, to where they've been told they're a nuisance, they're this, they're that. And what they like to do now is they like to just throw kids on drugs. They'll say they have ADD, ADHD, whatever, and put them on some drugs, which slows them down, which will slow them down generally to the pace of where the teacher's teaching versus speeding them up to the pace where they really should be. And when you give a kid mind-altering, mood-altering drugs at such a young age, sure, you're accomplishing one thing. You're going to make him docile. You're going to make him mind. You're going to make him all types of shit. But are you going to make him a better student? Are you going to make him a better child? And I don't think that's the case a lot of times. I think a lot of times kids lose something while being medicated in such a way, because there's nothing really governing that medicine once it hits that child's body, you know, whether it be your 10 milligrams, 20 milligrams, or whatever you're going to give that child. That child's going to get that in their system. It's going to start to do what it does. And it's going to take a long time for that child to recover from that. It'll definitely take a child a long time to get that out of its system. I never had any of those drugs or anything like that. And after a few months of just going back and forth, because I was amped. I had even told a few people, man, I'm getting promoted. I'm getting double promoted. I was geeked. Thought I was going to go to junior high school my next year. And I wasn't thinking about all the stuff that my mom was talking about. I was just like, damn, I'm going to be going to junior high. And it was just this inner battle at home. And I know my mom consulted with a couple of her siblings and talked about it, you know, and I remember a couple visits to the house, and people would just kind of look at me like I was different. I was the same shit. And I was, like I said, I wasn't a perfect kid. I was the same little aggressive, mischievous kid. But somebody had told me that I was different. So people would come over to the house and kind of look at me for a little while like, you know, what's going on here? What's got here? And I guess people kind of knew I was halfway smart already, but they didn't know what I was doing in school, and it was different. But she wasn't willing to make me or let me take that leap. I really wanted to take that leap. Be in 6th grade and go to the 7th grade, and maybe I would have never had any more academic problems, any more academic issues, or any issues with minding my manners and things like that. But because I was stuck where I was stuck, I was going to continue to either do the work, be a pest, be this, be that. And I was technically behind, because I was behind what I was capable of, not so much behind just in my class. I was behind what I was capable of doing. And that's all that matters in the grand scheme of things. I wasn't in a race to get better grades than anybody in school. I was trying to get the best grades that I could get. And they hadn't really been that important to me up to that point. But now someone's told me that I'm different. And as we know it now, I was gifted. Scholastically, I was gifted. I can't say never say I was some type of genius or anything, you know. And that's just maybe me just because I don't believe in all that. Special, you're special. And maybe I was just a little bit special. But I don't think parents, especially black parents, pay enough attention to where their kid is at academically. And allow their children to get put into a general track curriculum versus a collegiate track. When I say collegiate track, it's next level. Maybe they don't end up at a 4-year institution. Maybe they don't end up at a 2-year institution. Maybe they end up at a trade school. But you got to get them on that path to get there. If they're just going to take the classes that everybody takes and you're just putting them in Gen Pop. I never really liked school after that. I never really thoroughly enjoyed it because I just felt like I was behind. I don't talk about this shit a lot with people because it's, it's odd. But what I'm seeing now is I'm seeing some kids who I know are further ahead intellectually than they're given credit for. You get caught up in all these different type of curriculums in schools, and the kid really doesn't always shine just because they're getting A's or they're getting A's and B's or hell A's, B's, and C's. I understand that good grades are a sign of good study habits and turning in homework and good testing habits and all that. But that matters beans if you're really not taking that information and utilizing it the way you need to utilize it. And I don't think in this world, we're doing that anyway. I just seen somebody put up a meme that said, what the fuck did X times Y equals Z really do for me? I ain't needed that shit all my life. Something like that. Something to that effect. Weird ass algebra problems and geometry problems and shit we used to have. Like, we don't put that shit into effect now. But they gave us those problems as if that would be something a part of our daily life. And it ain't. I guess I said all of what I've said to just really make people get on point with their children's studies and make sure they understand that their child may be more intellectually than they think. And your kids only give off so much to you. You don't really see them stretch like that. It's not like you're giving them quizzes and giving them tests at home. And when they're in school, they're asked to do all these different things, and they may be doing some special things that you may not know. It's always good to have your child take an aptitude test to see exactly where they are. A real aptitude test, not these socially biased tests. I want to know if my grandkids are going to be gifted or not. Like that. I think they're very, very smart now. And I hope nothing catches up to them. If they continue on the track they're going to be far smarter than I ever was. And their mother is pretty smart. She's a very, very good student. For 5% of her school life. I anticipate the same with them, but I also want to see them stretched. They're just not going to take what's given. They're going to be taught things that they're going to utilize. Schoolwork is one thing. Real work is another. So I look forward to helping them broaden their horizons in different ways scholastically than just the teacher will give them. But you never know if your child is gifted unless you put it out there. And if someone tells you that your child is something in the way of a potential murderer, all because they're not able to control your child as a student, don't just jump all over them. Your child just ain't being bad. Your child might just be bored. And there's a difference between being bad and bored. And if your child is bad, then you got to wonder why your child is bad, because that generally starts at home. I know now that if I would have taken school differently, can't say more seriously, but differently, I would probably have a different life. And if my mother had taken me differently, she would have allowed me to take school differently, and I would have a different life. But I don't blame her, because she was protecting me. She wasn't trying to harm me by not allowing me to be doubly promoted. She was protecting me. And that's what we do to our children. We protect them. I get that. But sometimes protecting them is putting our foot in their ass and pushing them out there and say, hey, let's try it. Because the worst case scenario is, what were they going to do? Pull me back? If I go to 7th grade and they say, oh man, he can't do the work, what am I going to do? Go back to 6th grade? Where they just drop me all the way back to 5th grade? I mean, I'm proving that I'm capable of doing all this work, and then what if it gets to be too difficult for me? Or maybe they give me a tutor and have me catch up. I don't know. Because once you're up there, you're up there. I'm learning at the same level as these other kids. But not being able to be given that chance, I was only taken out of my 4th grade class and put into the 6th grade class when I would be done with my work. I mean, he would know, you done? Yep. I would just go on down to Miss Stoll's classroom. And that bothered him, because they were treating me differently. And it probably bothered him too, because my mother came in and cussed his ass out for telling me that I was going to be a murderer. I don't even know if he's still living. Maybe he's still living, or if he's still around. I wouldn't even care. I wouldn't care to have a conversation with him, though. I won't give a fuck. I'd like to let him know again, because I did let him know a long, long time ago that I wasn't in jail. I'd like to let him know that I did not end up killing anyone, at least up into this 51 years, and I'm free. But I wouldn't have anything to say to him. People like that just have no space in my life now. Because now I know him as a white supremacist. And I'm glad I know him as that. I would never trust him. If everything aligned and he was still teaching and my grandkids went to the school, I would make sure they wouldn't have him as a teacher. That could have destroyed a kid in 2021. You know, you see these young kids now, they committing suicide and different things like that. That might have destroyed a young 10-year-old in these times. These times are different than those times back then. 1980, totally different than, 2021. It's a lot of pressure you put on a child. Child might have not ever even told his mother, might have just went home and just hung himself. And he could have been gifted. And then you hear everybody and they do the interviews and they cry. He was so smart. He was so this. He was so that. But why'd he kill himself? Something happened in his life to make him do that. Did he have a teacher like Jim Corbett? Were they just not giving him enough work in school and he was always getting in trouble, and then he was told he was a nuisance and he was going to end up being a killer? His parents not check in on it? Make sure he was up to speed? And we deal with a lot of mental health issues now. You didn't hear about mental health back then, but you hear a lot of mental health issues now. And parents, just don't let them throw your kids on drugs. I'm trying to tell you. Your kids don't always need to take Ritalin and Paxil and Strattera and all that shit. Sometimes they need to be realigned and given significant consequences if they don't do what they need to do. And if you can't control them there, then you got to go to some next level shit. But sometimes it's really just that conversation you need to have with them to find out what the fuck is going on with them. Can't be scared to talk to them. Yeah, because you can't do much else as a parent out here now. It's hard to discipline your kids without fucking having to talk to CPS. But you got to do what you got to do. Because nobody else is going to help your child. Speaking specifically to black people on this one, never trying to alienate anybody else, but I don't know anybody that's not black that ever had this type of situation happen to them. I just know somebody that's black that did. Me. One love.